I'm Dana Denha, and you're watching FYI. As the battle against the virus continues, to ensure the success of area eateries and the safety of patrons downtown, Ann Arbor will continue to close streets. Learn more about how this will affect you next.
To allow for pedestrians to safely dine and shop outdoors, street closures for downtown Ann Arbor Pedestrian Mall begins April 1st through August 30th, 2021. These closures will provide a number of businesses and the community additional space for the downtown area for social distancing. From April 1st through August 30th, 2021, the following street closures will take place. 4 p.m. Thursdays through 6 a.m. Mondays. Main Street from William to Washington. Liberty Street from Ashley to 4th. Liberty Street from Maynard to State. State Street from Washington to William. 7-day-a-week closures. Washington Street from Ashley to Main Street, Maynard Street on the east side or northbound portion only from Liberty to William. For more information on downtown Ann Arbor and these closures, please visit mainstreetannarbor.org.
In 2018, FYI cameras caught up with Huron Valley Ambulance, HVA, as they hosted a camp to teach kids life-saving measures in the event of an emergency.
HVA hosts Camp 911 to get kids thinking about safety and how to react when a disaster strikes.
They're learning CPR, they're learning first aid, going to the emergency room, going to the fire department. So basically our focus is preparing the kids for emergencies.
We learned lots of stuff on what the Milan Fire Department does and how to be safe during a fire.
They're going to take them through all the different trucks, teach them the different types of trucks, like the difference between like the engine and the rescue and the different types of trucks that they run. Show them some of the equipment like the Jaws of Life and those sorts of things. And then just kind of what the daily life of a firefighter is like.
We learned how to know if a helmet fits you and how it's safe for you and why you should use it, the risks of not wearing one while you're biking.
During first aid, they're going to learn how to do bleeding control. So if they have somebody with a big bleed, they learn how to put pressure on it and bandage it and all those sorts of things, how to properly clean it. They're going to learn how to do some basic splints for broken bones.
If you're in a situation where somebody's in cardiac arrest or somebody is just like not in a well shape, they need to be able to know what to do, or when they call 911, they need to know what to do when the ambulance is coming.
You're giving the kids the skill, so you're giving them something that they might really need to use.
It's that time of year to get out and ride. But before your wheels hit the pavement, learn some tips to keep your bike in tip-top shape in this month's City Roundup in 60.
Hello, I'm Doug Martell with the Ann Arbor Police Department. We're going to talk about a pre-check on your bikes. I call it the ABC. You're getting ready to dust your bikes off for the season. So A is for air. Make sure that your tires are properly inflated, that you have good tread on your tires. B for brakes. You want to make sure that your brakes are working properly, because if you're going, you're going to need to stop at some point. So make sure that your brakes are working properly. If you need help with those, I'm sure your local bike shop will help you out. And C is for chain. You need to have a chain that's working well, that's not rusty and corroded. So make sure that your chain is working. If it's rusty and it doesn't look like it's going to take any lube, your local bike shop can help you out getting the right length of chain for you. Thanks for watching. Please ride safely. Enjoy the ride.
Authors and husband and wife, this Windsor-based couple always loved baseball, but they felt their passion for the game slipping away. Instead of letting their shared interests disappear into their memory bank, they decided to embark on a journey that took them to ballparks of all kinds within a 100-mile radius of their home. Joining me is Heidi and Dale Jacobs, authors of 100 Miles of Baseball. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having us.
So I'd first like to know about I'm going to start with you, Dale, because I think you were the initial baseball lover in the relationship. Why don't you talk about how you started really getting into baseball and what made you kind of want to be this person that took this on in your adult life and shared it with your significant other?
Well, like so many people, it goes back to when I was a kid and my dad. That was how we connected, was through watching baseball. I grew up in rural Alberta, so we didn't have Major League Baseball close, but we had the Expos on TV, and we used to watch that all the time. So that was how we connected. I kind of went away from baseball for a while and came back to it in my kind of later 20s. And again, that was a way to connect with Dad. And then when I met Heidi, I think one of the first conversations we ever had was about Chicago, and I talked about the Cubs, and she asked if I'd been to the Art Institute. And over the years, I think my interest in baseball has become part of her life, and her interests in art and ballet have become part of mine. So it's been a journey.
It's a beautiful thing. It's good to have hobbies and shared interests together, because your relationship's not going to flourish if you don't have those things. Exactly. Heidi, did you feel reluctant to get into baseball? I know I struggle a little bit with sports. I mean, my husband's like a big football guy, and I try, but I struggle.
Yeah, I struggle with football too, I have to admit. I grew up watching hockey like a good Edmonton child. So it wasn't that hard to switch to baseball. My grandfather was a baseball player in southern Saskatchewan in the Prairie League, so he would watch, and I'd watch a little bit with him. But Dale liked doing it so much, and it's interesting, and you either have to learn to love it or find something else to do, and I learned to love it. And it's been a really great journey, as you've said.
I find it very interesting how romantic baseball actually can be, because I'm going to bring this own story of someone, my sister actually got engaged at a Tigers game, because that was like their sort of romance. They would go to baseball games together all the time. They'd go to the Tigers all the time, and they ended up getting engaged at a game. And I thought it was really interesting, because growing up, I never saw her watch baseball or anything, but it was something that, like, you shared it together, and then it created that love for the game.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourselves? And you both write books, and you've co-authored together, right?
I guess we've both been writing for a long time. We're both academics by training. We did PhDs at the University of Nebraska, and we've written one co-authored piece together about our academic work. I teach writing, and Heidi's a librarian, so we've written about how those things cross. But I write a lot about comics and comic studies, and so I do have a book on comics and literacy that came out in 2013, and I'm working on a book now that's half comic studies, looking at the comics of 1976, and half creative nonfiction about the death of my mother. That's all kind of wrapped up with that time of being 10 years old. So I guess that's my background with writing.
Heidi?
I do a lot of academic writing, as Dale said, but I also I had a novel come out a couple of years ago, which couldn't be any less connected with baseball than you could imagine. It's sort of about a young woman trying to write a novel, but she lives in Edmonton, and she works in a shoe store, and so she's trying to find the Jane Austen elements working in a shoe store. So it's very baseball. I don't think there's even a mention of it. But I'm also currently working on a book about a historic baseball team called the Chatham Colored All-Stars, the 1934 team. Chatham's just up the road from Windsor, and they were the first Black baseball team to win the Ontario Baseball Association championship. So their story is really, really fascinating. So somehow baseball just keeps popping up into my life. I haven't really gone looking for it, but it just I keep attracting it in some ways. But I think one of the things about the writing that I do and my background in baseball is I'm really interested in narrative. And to me, baseball is a narrative. And so it's always like, oh, what's going to happen? And who are the characters? And what's the plot? And what's the conflict? And all the plot twists that can happen in a game. So that's sort of how I got into watching baseball, was thinking about it as a narrative.
So you guys embark on this journey together. Did you find it hard to incorporate both of your voices into this book together? Because it's very much each individual voice, but it blends well.
We sat down and we each wrote separately about all 50 games. And so then we came together with these enormous manuscripts. I think to start with, we had 145,000 words or something between the two of us, but we sat on our back deck with 2 laptops and 2 hard copies, and then just initially tries to shuffle it together. And then as we worked in revisions, we did a lot of thinking about how it fit chronologically and how each of our arcs moved through the book, our narrative arcs. But we see such different things at the ballpark that it was always fairly complementary to move back and forth. It was mostly a matter of chronology.
What happened that you initially decided to write this book? You guys both sort of lost your interest in the game, right? And then but you didn't want to lose it. You wanted to maintain that passion that you once had.
I think we had partial season tickets for, I don't know, it was about 10 years or so. And it got to the point the last year that we did August, we were just tired of every Sunday heading out to the ballpark, and it started to drag, and we thought, what's happened here? And so I can't remember what year that was offhand.
2016.
2016. So in 2017, we thought, well, let's not renew our package because it just wasn't as fun as it had been, but let's go to a bunch of different kinds of games. And we did, but then it would be, July, and who wants to go sit in the sun on a Sunday? So we didn't really do that. So then in 2018, I think Dale came up with this idea about, like, why don't we just be a little more proactive and formalized about it? Let's do 50 games in 100 miles. And we pitched the idea to Biblioasis as a book, and they were really excited by it. So that's kind of how it started. And then at the end of game 2, I thought, what have we just got into? But it was really a great journey.
Were you surprised how the journey sort of ended up in the end, or even the process of the journey, because you said at the beginning it felt sort of daunting, but then you enjoyed it. So how did that change for you?
It happened so quickly. I think we pitched the idea to Biblioasis sometime in early March, and then by something like the 30th, we were at our first game. We'd signed a contract and all of that. And it was just like, so it really did happen really quickly. But what was interesting is we didn't have, and I think this is part of any kind of study like this, we didn't have any preconceived notions about where we would go. We thought we knew which games we'd go. We thought we knew which places we'd go, but week by week, it was sort of figuring out where to go. And then we had no idea what we would learn, if we would love baseball at the end, whether I would never ever want to go to another game again. Like, we really weren't sure what would happen. So every game we went to was like, okay, what are we going to learn today? What are we going to see? And I think that was part of it, just not knowing what was happening and being open to figuring out whatever happened. So we didn't want to have like an end result at the end of the book. So that's what we were doing.
What was one of the things that you were surprised you learned in the process? Maybe you learned something about yourself or about each other or the game.
I feel like I learned a lot about the game, just watching so much, and not just at the major league level. I mean, it's easy to get kind of blasé about, oh, of course they're going to make that play because these are athletes at the top of their game. But if you watch everything from high school students to university players to minor leaguers to the majors, you're reminded how hard this game is, and you watch players develop their skills, and I think I learned a lot about how people learn to play the game. I learned a lot about pitching because I sat right behind home plate, and I watched the pitches break, and the way that pitchers were trying to work hitters. So a lot of what I learned had something to do with the game, but I think I also learned what it means to be present. And through baseball, I think that is something I came to realize because, I didn't care who won. We were trying to just watch these games, and it didn't matter. And that made us actually outsiders most of the time because we weren't either cheering for a team or
Well, you weren't
we
really
did,
invested in the teams,
no,
right? They were teams you didn't
no,
really know.
no, and we didn't have kids playing. Like often people would say, "Well, who's your kid playing here?" If we
Yeah,
were
that
at a
was
high
one of the
school
funny
game,
things
or
when I was reading. You guys were like the only spectators at some of these
yeah,
games that weren't parents or family
yeah,
members.
yeah,
But actually, I think that makes the players feel good when people show up to the
yeah.
games that aren't family members.
Absolutely. And so showing up to all these games, you're trying to, as Heidi said, trying to see what's interesting, what's beautiful in each one of these games. And it's easy to see if it's a 2-1 close game, but we saw games that were 15-4, so then you're looking for moments, and you really have to be present in the game and not check out. And I think it taught me a lot about that, and a lot about watching baseball. I watch a lot differently now. Half the time I don't even know when the Tigers are playing anymore. If I want to watch baseball, I turn on my MLB package and I see which games are on, and I flip on whichever one looks like it'll be the most interesting game.
Well, that was the one thing when I was like reading the book and researching you guys, it seems like doing this made you have realized how exciting a non-professional game is, going to the college level and going to the minor leagues and the high school games and stuff, and like really seeing these people try really hard. And not, when you're a professional, like you said, you already have that athleticism, you're already there, so you have a certain expectation of those players, where these people, you have no idea. You could have some play that you would have never expected to see because you have no idea what they're capable of. So I would like, actually, I found it interesting that you talked about, how you both had your own vision of the game and how you watched the game differently. And maybe, Dale, you can talk about Heidi's perspective and vice versa. Were you surprised by how she viewed the game?
No, we've been together a long time now, so I really wasn't. We've been going to a lot of baseball for 20 years, more than 20 years. So I knew that she saw a lot what was happening in the crowd and kind of the things on the edge. So it didn't surprise me a whole lot. I mean, occasionally in game I would say, "Did you see that curveball?" And she didn't. She saw a guy wearing maize pants at the U of M game. But that part didn't surprise me. What did surprise me is after we didn't talk much as we were writing our own sections, but at the end, when I read that she was trying to watch baseball like me over that summer, that I didn't know. I didn't realize she had that in the back of her head.
Heidi, what about you? Were you surprised when you saw his pages and the way he sort of was watching the game?
Not too much. I mean, it always just always amazes me that how much Dale can focus on stuff. Like looking at his notes from his thing, he's just got play by play by play. And quite often I'd have it wrong. And so when we were doing the final edits, we'd go back to his and he'd like, "Oh no, that guy was on third. He wasn't on second." So that kind of detail. And I've always been so amazed at how focused he can be. He can just tune everything out and be so present and focused so much. And as Dale said, I did spend most of the project. I think it wasn't until we got to the Lugnuts game, which was one of our last games, that I realized, you know what? Everybody watches baseball differently, and I just need to embrace. I see stuff that Dale doesn't see, and he watches it for what he sees, and I need to sort of embrace the weird, wonderful, odd ways that I watch too. And I realized, I think it was at that Lugnuts game that I'm looking around, and thought everybody's watching this game for different things. And that was one of the things that I really took away, whether you're cheering for your kid or you're cheering for a team or some guy in your high school you think is kind of cute. Like everybody's cheering for a totally different reason. And that's the beautiful thing to me about baseball, is everybody has their own, there's room enough to watch it in multiple ways, sometimes even multiple ways at the same time, actually. So
Of your
Yeah.
100 miles of baseball, did you feel like you had one game that you really enjoyed that really stuck out above the rest?
We both, I think, have the same game. It's the game in Sarnia, Ontario, and it was our was it 26th
Six,
game, Dale?
yeah, 26.
So, that was just, I think we'd had this huge stretch of just tons and tons of games, and um, neither of us really wanted to get into the car and drive that night after work. And because we were also doing this on top of our full-time jobs too, right? So
Yeah, yeah. I
we
mean,
get
you guys,
home and
you guys work. This is not, writing a book. I think people don't realize that, like, authoring a book, usually you have another job too.
oh yeah, exactly. So, we'd go to work, sort of 8 to 4 or 9 to 5 or whatever, and then see baseball on evenings and weekends and that kind of thing. Um, so we were just exhausted and grumpy, and we didn't want to do it. And in my head, I'm like, oh, we still have this many more to go. And then we get to Sarnia, and the oppressive heat just somehow magically dissipated. And it was July 4th, and we could hear the fireworks once it started getting dusk. And it was the most magical, beautiful game. It just, I don't know, I mean, there were 10 people or so in the crowd, and it just made everything seem doable and beautiful. And it was like, this is why we're doing the project, that we can see that. So, that's one of my favorites. I might have stolen Dale's too, but
I mean, that's definitely one of them. I would say that the other one, that one is for the atmosphere and what it did sort of in terms of the project. It kind of was the turning point, I think, for both of us.
Do you think you both sort of started feeling excited about the project after that?
Yeah, I think I was excited about the project before that. The the NCAA Division III regionals in Adrian was I think the real turning point for me, where I started to get really excited. I always was really engaged in the project, but that weekend of watching that tournament was pretty magical. And one of the games in that tournament is one of my favorites as well, and that was Adrian College playing a game where their starter Tommy Parsons had a complete game, threugh 146 pitches, which is unreal. Most starters in the major leagues maybe throw 100. And it was just an exciting game. It was kind of electric, and then I think that game has also been special because I've followed it. He started last night for the Cardinals AAA team, and he's very close to making the majors. So part of that summer was this fun thing of keeping up where some of these players are now that we saw in college or summer collegiate league or the minors, and watching them progress. So seeing him so close is pretty special for me. But that game and that whole tournament was magical.
Do you think that this book is got a little something for everyone, or is it more for just the person that's really passionate about watching baseball and getting to know more about baseball?
obviously it is because it's the subject of it. But I think it's also about learning. It's a a book about trying to challenge yourself and learn more. I mean, I think one of my frustrations I realized that I was having with baseball is that my knowledge had sort of hit a bit of a plateau, and I didn't quite realize it at the time that I just really needed to relearn it or learn things differently or learn how to be present and how to see. That was like a huge thing. Like, how do I watch? Like, how do I actually watch baseball? What do I need to look for? And in some ways, it's no different than going out, as I often do, looking for birds and trees, right? Like, how do you find them? What do they look like? And once you start to see a couple little things, then it gets more exciting, and then there are actual species instead of just little flying things around. So I think no matter what you're interested in, there is that sense of like, how do you learn something new? How do you see? And it's also, I think, probably too a little bit about relationships. How do two people do the same thing and still maintain who they are and feed off each other and learn from each other too.
Well, before we go, do you want to tell people how and why they should check out this book? where they can get it? I assume they can get it pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, it's available everywhere. If your local independent doesn't have it, they can certainly order it for you. It's available at all the online retailers. It's certainly a book that baseball people, I think, will like, especially when it's hard to go to baseball right now. You know, in Canada, we just don't have any baseball. It's not open. Nobody's playing, and you know, in the US, it's reduced capacities at all the parks. It's hard to see live baseball, and I think this book gives kind of a window into the live experience. And it's also, to pick up on Heidi's comment, it's a book about relationships, certainly about our relationship, but I think it's also about other relationships as well, parents and kids, and players and coaches, the people we kind of brought along on the trip with us, if only in our minds. You know, the friends I had at different places who I watched baseball with, they were there with me, and my dad was there with me. I talk about him a lot in the book. Heidi talks a lot about her mom and her grandfather, and so while it is about baseball, it's about a lot of other things as well. And it's also it's a road trip book.
And also, I will add to this, because we're in Michigan, there's a strong Michigan connection to the book as well. So you might know some of these teams, you might know some of the players even.
Yeah, out of the 50 games, there were, and we didn't plan this, but there are 25 games in Ontario and 25 in the US, almost all of them in Michigan. I think there would be 20 in Michigan and 5 in Ohio, because when you draw the circle, we get to include Cleveland and a little swath there. So, but yeah, probably about 20 games in
That's a lot. Yeah.
Michigan.
And it's teams that you're not necessarily thinking about. You know, you're going to the minor league. You went to Shelby Township, right? That's like where I grew up.
Yes, we did.
And they didn't have a minor league team when I grew up there. That's something that happened in the last like decade or so, that team showed up there in that stadium.
Yeah, that's the 4-team minor league. That's a fun little park to go to. And we went to the Lansing Lugnuts and Albion College and Adrian College, and we went to several games at the ballpark that sits where Tiger Stadium used to be. You know, we saw the Great Lakes Intercollegiate Tournament there with Wayne State and a bunch of those Division II teams. And so, yeah, we saw a lot of games in Michigan. We saw some historic baseball in Michigan.
I actually really enjoy watching historic baseball. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it really is. And Michigan is one of the big places for it in North America. So, yeah, we were definitely always going to have a historic game as part of this project.
Heidi, did you want to add anything before we go?
No, other than yeah, it is partially a travel log. There's a lot about food, eat on the road, or not find, and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think one of the differences when we were putting it together is really how there are some very funny and interesting differences, even though it's 100 miles, which isn't that much. It's just sometimes it's a radically different world, just 50 miles down the road. So there's some of that for sure.
Well, I want to thank you both for coming on the show and sharing your story.
Oh, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much.
For more on this and other programs, visit a2gov.org/CTN. Visit youtube.com/CTN Ann Arbor to see all that we have to offer. Remember to like, comment, and share. Thanks for watching, and tune in next time to FYI.